says, the mission of the Nature Conservancy is to conserve the lands and waters on which all life depends. Our vision is a world where the diversity of life thrives and people act to conserve nature for its own sake and its ability to fulfill the needs and enrich our lives. Through the dedicated efforts of the Nature Conservancy, there are 600 scientists of whom impact conservation in 69 countries. With the help of many of the partners, from individuals and governments to local nonprofits and corporations. By using a non-confrontational, collaborative approach and staying true to our 5 unique core values, that's how the Nature Conservancy has done more than anyone else in the advancement of conservancy around the world since 1951. And one of the items that I was really not so familiar with is how you also get involved with local cities, villages, and so when our mayor had heard that you were going to come and speak to us, she was remiss that she couldn't be here because they're having a village meeting tonight, but this is why we have the cameras here, because she wanted to hear your presentation. So Julie Rosenfeld is actually a resident from the Key for more than 25 years, a scientist by training. She does fundraising in the local office for the Nature Conservancy in Coral Gables. And Julie has lived on Key Biscayne 20 years, is that correct? 20 years? With her husband, 2 daughters, and 2 cats. So, Julie, looking forward to your presentation.
My father was a proud Rotarian, so I'm really thrilled to be here. He was a member in Massachusetts, which is where I grew up. So what I'm going to do is tell you why does a group like the Nature Conservancy, which is about nature, care about cities. I'm going to start my comments by taking you to Seoul, South Korea. And this picture was taken in the 50s, and this is your typical post-war development, the city of the future. And what you see, and Rosa, you've seen some of this too, is a highway running right down the middle of the city, because we all have to get places. There's asphalt, there's cars, there's dirty air, there's very little nature, there's very little place for people to be outside, and it's really, aside from the fact that it's black and white, it's what we call gray infrastructure. It's all built up. There's no green to be seen. And when you develop a city this way, you get heat, you get pollution, you get a lack of contact with the natural world. And frankly, if you think about downtown Miami, this is Route 95 coming right down the middle of Overtown, dividing the city with very little green to be seen. But what you're not seeing in this picture is right here, underneath the freeway, is the Chongcheng River, which ran through the heart of Seoul, and by the 1970s was dead. So why am I showing you this lovely picture? Well, our world is becoming urban. And if we look now, there are about 7 million people in the world, about 50% of whom live in cities. And 30 years from now, we project with 9 billion people, we will have 80% of our people living in cities. Every year in China, a new city the size of New York City takes shape. And every 6 weeks around the globe, cities are growing to be the size of New York City. So that's a lot of cities. We also know people are pouring into Florida, and I can certainly say for the brief 20 years I've lived here, I have seen downtown Miami transformed. I can't believe what I see when I drive through our city. So why do we talk about working in cities? Well, first, we're worried about habitat loss. Urban growth has a terrific impact on the plants and animals that live in our natural world. And 1 in 4 species are threatened by urban growth and the expansion of the urban footprint. And in the coming decades, that number is going to go to 10% globally. As far as people are concerned, we need natural lands to provide us with food, to provide us with water, recreation, to clean our air. We get a lot of benefits from nature that I'll talk a little more about that are being threatened by this rapid growth of cities. In terms of air quality, we've all read about what goes on in Delhi, in China, and London with bad air. And there's an explosion of asthma and other kinds of pulmonary diseases in all of our cities because of all of these guys, all these cars, all that little particles. That's particularly threatening to people. And a city without green is a hot city. So what you see are heat islands. And you see more of the elderly and people in the inner city being killed because, dying during heat waves, because there's nowhere to go to get away from the heat if you don't have air conditioning. The third big reason we think about cities and are concerned about them is stormwater. And we all know that we have flooding in Miami and we have problems with stormwater runoff. But it's the fastest growing source of pollution in our rivers and in our oceans. More than 700 cities around the United States are in violation of EPA standards because of stormwater, which collects all that gunk that's on those sidewalks and streets and just runs it down through to our waterways. And with the change in climate, we're expecting more of these very big storms with lots and lots of runoff. So, and actually there is a fourth reason. As more people move to cities, we get more and more disconnected from nature. If you think about the kids who grew up in Key Biscayne are lucky. They have the bay, they have the ocean, they have the village green and places to play. But your average kid who lives in an urban or suburban community spends less than 30 minutes a week out of doors. It's creating a generation that's afraid of nature and of things that crawl. They won't lie in the grass. They're afraid of bugs. So we see it's very, very, it's not a good thing to have the new generations coming up not liking nature, being afraid of it, and not appreciating it. So we need to find ways to connect kids to nature. So I want to go back to Seoul because this is what's happened. This was taken in 2005. The city removed that overpass and created a linear park that runs through the city. Why? Because they needed to deal with stormwater. That is the sort of impetus for this kind of development. And so what you see is people reconnecting with nature. You see a greenway that runs through the heart of the city that provides a pathway for birds and animals that may be trying to transit the city of Seoul. So you have flood control. The water filters down into the river slowly through the vegetation, which cleans it, and it gets back into the aquifer of the natural systems. And fish that hadn't been seen in 50 years started swimming back up the Chongchong River. So this project has been studied all over the globe. You have places like the High Line in New York. You have the Kennedy in Boston, the Kennedy Parkway, which is where they buried their central artery that ran through the heart of Boston. I founded that up in Boston. And we have things like the underline here, where we're looking to add more green within our urban core. So this is why we, the Nature Conservancy, talk about cities. How do we bring nature into cities and have nature serve the residents of cities? So a lot of you have told me how much you know about us, but there may be a few folks, so I'm going to talk quickly. Peter, you said a lot of great things about us. Thank you very much. We're not quite as big as Rotary. We only have 1 million members, and we're only in 67 countries, but we're working to catch up. So the Nature Conservancy has been around for 51 years. And when we started talking about protecting nature, it was because a group of scientists said, after the war, nature's disappearing rapidly with suburban growth. We need to save the plants and animals that nature needs to survive. And so that's how we started, buying up pieces of land and putting fences around it. But as we came to understand nature better and study it more, we realized you can't put a fence around it because what's going on around that fence has an impact. So in the 80s and early 90s, we began to work at a much larger scale. The scale of whole rivers, whole mountain systems, entire Great Plains networks. Because we recognize that those have to function with economic activity to keep people functioning, to provide food, to provide energy, to provide water, and to regulate our climate. So we began to talk about the value of nature for people. It's another reason we think about all of this. We also know that nature has a real economic value. If you think about tourism in Florida, you think about fisheries, you think about forestry, that's an economic value that nature brings to people. And if you wanted to have water to turn on your faucet, when you turn on your faucet and you want the government to deliver it to you, you need that forest somewhere to be capturing the rain, filtering it, sending it down our rivers, and sending it to your tap. So that's another reason. And the third is that people are really connected to place. For people who grew up here as a key rat, all of the natural values of our community are very important to you, just as they are to this lady who lives in a gur out on the Mongolian plain. It's part of your culture, and it's part of your value system, it's part of the Native American prayer we heard. Nature has a spiritual and social value. So for nature to provide, for society to be healthy, nature needs to be healthy. So in the Nature Conservancy, I'm going to go quickly through this, we focus on 5 areas. We protect land at a big scale. When we talk about working in the Everglades, we talk about working in the whole Everglades, not in the loosely piece of it. If we are talking about freshwater conservation, we're looking at what's going on in a whole river, in an estuary or a wetland. We're looking at how to protect springs all over Florida. We work in ocean conservation, rebuilding reefs, protecting them, managing them, dealing with fisheries, aquaculture, coastal lands. And we're taking on climate change, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but our focus is decreasing greenhouse gases. And we're going to we work in cities, because we want cities to function well and be what we call resilient, able to provide for the increasing numbers of people who live there, and able to sustain the nature that surrounds them. So really quickly in Florida, I'm not going to go this, but we're working anywhere you see here. We're working in the Everglades. We're working along the entire reef tract here that goes from Martin County down to the Dry Tortugas. We're restoring oyster reefs in Charlotte Harbor, Mosquito Lagoon, and up in the Panhandle. This whole part of our state is all longleaf pine. We're working across this entire area, and we create wildlife corridors for creatures like the Florida panther and black bears. And we're really beginning to take on the liquid heart of Florida, how to protect our springs and the rivers that, if you go up in this part of the state especially, you can't imagine how many tiny little rivers and springs flow together, that characterizes our state. So we are working in all these areas. So on climate, it's really about changing how we think about climate and how we talk about it, and how to get people mobilized to reduce their carbon emissions. And we want to change how we talk about clean energy. We don't see it as oil or alternative energy. We want to say, how does clean energy provide an economic opportunity in our state for us to thrive and adopt more clean energy? And this is really someplace where we have the most experience here. How do we use natural lands to suck up carbon and protect our world? Rainforests, mangroves, oceans, reefs, seagrass, all of those absorb carbon and can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So if we can protect those for that reason, for their habitat value, for recreational value, we're also getting climate benefit. And that kind of brings me to cities. And the Conservancy started getting involved in cities with the Southeast Florida Climate Change Compact, which is a 4-county initiative with Martin, Broward, Monroe, and Miami-Dade County. Because we who sit here in sort of ground zero of sea level rise and climate change, we know that we need to do something to stop our flooding, to protect our aquifer, and to adapt our community to changes. Ruben runs this group, but there's all kinds of committees addressing transportation and adaptation. And our focus is sort of what goes along the coast. How can we use nature to buffer our coasts? Let me give you an example of a project, a couple projects we're working on. We consider this part of our urban program because Miami is built on the water. Actually, most of South Florida cities are built on the water. So this is taken from, from Matthew, that's Flagler County. And there are some lovely breakwaters and dunes that were along there, which were completely decimated in the storm. But if they had not been there, the ocean would have washed right up here and these houses would not have been there. And we have seen in places like New Jersey, during Superstorm Sandy, where there were dunes in front of the homes, those homes are still standing on Long Beach Island, along those New Jersey barrier islands. But the people who took down their dunes because they didn't like them blocking their views, those houses are gone. Dunes provide protection. And so we are working with the Climate Change Compact to figure out where do we have natural features that can help protect our community, and where should we be restoring natural features, putting dunes back along A1A in Fort Lauderdale and places like that because of the protections that they provide. Mangroves are another important feature. There are schools in the Caribbean that are still standing because they were backed up against some mangroves during a Category 3 hurricane that passed right over them, and they didn't even lose a roof tile. But anywhere they had taken down those mangroves were flattened. So our natural world provides this service to us if we're willing to let it stay there. So this is the South Bay water treatment plant. And it is buffered from the ocean by a huge mangrove forest. And one of the things that we're doing with our scientists is measuring the buffering value of that, the protective value that those mangroves are, so that the county can come out and say, yes, we need more mangroves. Yes, this is important. This is protecting important infrastructure for our community from storms. And at some point, there's a project in the Yucatan where they're looking at the use of coral reefs and mangroves. Coral reefs reduce storm energy by about 90%. When the waves break on the coral reef as they rush to shore. In the Yucatan, a bank of hotels is having us do a study there because it's going to reduce their insurance premiums. By keeping mangroves strategically placed and keeping those coral reefs intact and protected, they are going to save money. So nature can provide not just what's a pretty fish habitat, a cool place to get away, it can provide real economic benefits to business. So we're trying to do the science so you can go out and folks can do this. This is an all too familiar scene here in Florida and on Key Biscayne, sadly. But this is stormwater flooding. Some of this actually you can't really tell. This is kind of bubbling up here through the storm sewers. And this is our version of stormwater issues. And how have cities around the country dealt with this? We're working in cities all over the country to put in things like this. And these are called rain gardens. And what you'll notice is there's little breaks in the pavement here where the water that falls on the pavement can filter into the rain garden, percolate through the soil, get cleaned, and re-enter the aquifer and not pool there, stay dirty, rush into the sewers straight to the river. So Portland has done more of this than just about anybody. And everyone has come to Portland to look at their rain gardens. And it's very specific kinds of plants. So putting a lawn here, putting a grass swale does not give you the same benefit. Grass does not absorb the same way. And it doesn't clean the same way. So there's a real science to this that we learned that you need to have if you really are serious about soaking up that water and cleaning it. This is Harbin, China. And in China, they don't want to put that in the city. They have created what they call sponge cities. And they are piping their stormwater out to these enormous fields, which serve also as recreational spots, to soak up 70% of their stormwater on 20% of the footprint of the city. And they're doing this, and I don't know how many more cities, 32 pilot cities around the country. So it's their way of handling stormwater. We could think about something like this around Miami if we piped all our water out towards the Everglades. It would provide a way of cleaning it and putting more water in the Everglades, but we're not there yet. So it's just an idea. So what do we have in Miami? We can't use rain gardens to the extent that other cities can because our water table is too high. Our we have a different kind of rock and soil substrate. So you can't solve all the flooding on the various streets here by changing what we put in the streets. One thing we can think about is canals. It's not going to help us here in Key Biscayne, but we can think about it in other parts of the city that have terrible flooding problems. And let me get you oriented here. This is 95, and this is 836, and this is the health district, the medical center, University of Miami, the courts down here, Christie House is here, the VA is up there, Jackson. So that kind of gets you oriented to where we are. And this is Wagner Creek. Wagner Creek daylights up at Duarte Park, just up in Alpata. And it flows down behind the medical center and the VA, and comes out here and runs underneath into Spring Garden, comes into the Seabold Canal, and dumps into the Miami River. I have seen manatees from where it actually flows under the driveway at University of Miami Hospital, and I have seen manatees just paddling along there because it connects out to the river. And it's tidally influenced, and it's also one of the most polluted waterways in the state of Florida. There was a great deal of industry in the blocks around that area, and the city is under decree to dredge it. So it creates a really interesting opportunity to think, how can a canal help mitigate surface water and stormwater? So we're working to develop a creek-wide plan for taking these lands, which are owned by the county, and some of them, this is University of Miami property, and they're our partner in this, and creating more of a wetland and park area at various strategic locations up the length of Wagner Creek, both to help mitigate some of the stormwater flooding, to capture some of the junk that's coming in from that surface water before it gets into the river, and also to create community green spaces, because goodness knows with 100,000 people passing through there every day, and these communities do not have a lot of parks. So if we could create some little pocket areas that would serve our refreshing and green space function for the community, we're eager to do that. So we're going to be, thanks to the Miami Foundation, we have a challenge grant for public space challenge to bring the community together, create a vision for what they would like to see along the waterway, and then as we put in those parks, we're going to be working with the county and the city to actually create some wetlands to capture and filter the water and slow it down and put it into the river to make it cleaner. So this is one of our first big projects. We're just in the community visioning stage, but we're working very closely with the city and the county on this. But this is a typical area that is hot, treeless, dirty air. Oh, okay. All right, so why do we need trees? Keeps us cooler and gets kids outside. It makes it easier for people to walk and get around the city. But the cooling factor is huge. And the other thing that trees can do is if you plant the right trees in the community, they can reduce the amount of particulates that are in the air. So by 20 to 50%, you can clean the air within 60 to 100 meters of a tree, which says in neighborhoods, you should have trees of this variety. The right tree, they have little hairs on their leaves, and that's what traps all the particles that are coming out of our cars and out of trucks and things. Miami, the average city in the U.S. has 27% urban tree cover. We have between 8% and 40% in places like Coral Gables. And of course, it's the underserved communities that are down at the 8%. So we've been invited by groups in Sweetwater and a few in Little Haiti to come in and help them get a vision for what kind of green spaces they want and what kind of trees they want, so that we can get not only community buy-in for having these trees and green spaces, but then community stewards, because there's no point in planting a tree if people don't want to see it. And in Louisville, we're doing a health study with University of Louisville. Louisville, Kentucky is some of the worst air in the country. And they are greening up some of the inner city neighborhoods, and they're going to be looking over 5 years at public health results to see if lung disease and asthma attacks increase in that area, to make that connection. This is an artist's interpretation of Melbourne, Australia. This is my next to last slide. Melbourne, I don't know if you've ever seen the funny YouTube videos of people, and heard about people writing letters to the trees, but they're a very tree-aware city. The problem for Melbourne is that there's 4.4 million people in there now, and it's going to grow to almost 8 million people. And the growth of the city is significantly impacting about 120 endangered species in Australia. So the city has invited the Nature Conservancy to come in on an urban forestry project to see how can we put wildlife corridors, basically, through the heart of the city and create spaces for animals while you're also creating an incredible place for humans to live. And this, this is just an artist's rendition, but they're really into the green roofs, and I don't think it's going to go quite this far, but it's a fun idea. But we are working there. And the last thing I wanted to show you is this slide comes from a rendition in Philadelphia. Philadelphia had a stormwater problem, and they were going to have to sink a huge amount of money into pipes and pumps to deal with stormwater in the urban core in some of the worst neighborhoods, places that people couldn't wait to get out of. And the city water manager decided to green up 700 acres of that community by building rain gardens instead. And what he succeeded in doing was taking 4 million gallons of dirty water out of the system and putting it back in the aquifer. And so by all means, it was a success. But what he also did unwittingly was transform the community. The rain gardens became playgrounds for kids. The grandparents started sitting out and watching their grandkids. Parents started taking an active life in the neighborhood and coming outside in the evenings. And they essentially rejuvenated the neighborhood. So what you had was a hydrology project that transformed a neighborhood that nobody wants to move out of. So this is why the Nature Conservancy thinks about cities. It's about public health. It's about showing kids that outdoors is fun, and it's a good thing, and nature is a good thing. It's about clean water. It's about creating space for birds and bugs and whatever wants to pass through the trees. And it's about creating really a more livable, healthy environment for all of us to live in. I'm done. So. I'm happy to take any questions because I tried to buzz through quickly.
I have a quick question. I've heard that palm trees are not that great in terms of absorbing carbon dioxide.
Correct.
Neither is grass.
Correct.
Okay.
And palm trees don't provide shade. And when those fronds fall down on you, that's 100 pounds of some of those leaves.
And grass also.
Grass is not good. Grass is what we call monoculture, and it doesn't have the water cleansing properties of certain wild grasses, which look scruffy. One of the biggest challenges in putting these rain gardens in, I'll be honest, is that for people in underserved communities, they think about the beautiful verdant green lawns that they see in the suburbs, and some of those trees, and that's what they want where they live, of course, because that's what rich people have. But if you're trying to stop flooding, and you want clean water, you need a different suite of plants that have a much stronger water cleansing property, and they can be a little scruffy.
And clean air, at least insofar as, at least I think I heard that the city of Los Angeles was trying to discourage planting of the palm trees because they really don't act as a good.
Well, you need the trees that have those little fingers on their leaves, because those are the ones that pull the particulates out, and those are the particulates that cause the asthma attacks. That really irritate the lungs.
Is there a list of particular plant vegetation online that we can look at?
I could probably find one, have one of my scientists provide one. I personally don't know what they are, but I might. We have a scientist on staff who
Probably a great idea. Maybe the Islander News could do that.
Yeah,
That's
a great suggestion.
Any other questions? I have a question.
Yes.
There's some concerns with what's going on in Washington right now with regard to the EPA being there or not being there. And I was just curious if the Nature Conservancy gets involved at all politically, or does it completely stay out of that? Or how do you handle these issues that come up statewide, nationally, with regard to endangerment to a lot of the goals that you're trying to attain?
Well, the Nature Conservancy believes it's better to be in conversation with everybody, because you can always find some common ground. So just as we will talk with oil companies as much as we'll talk with, let's say, alternative energy, we work with agriculture interests, we work with ranchers in Florida, our goal is to work with everyone. So yes, we do have a whole climate change and government relations program. They focus on different agencies, so we have some folks who work with ag and some who work with, the Department of the Interior. But yes, we are very much involved with conversations with congressmen about the EPA. We have a whole team that goes to Washington, to Tallahassee as well. We're very quiet about some of our initiatives. We have been able to put legislation into things like the water bill to guarantee funding for springs restoration. So that's where the $50 million for springs restoration came from. We were very, very involved in having that language inserted into the bill. We were very involved in having the language for that $200 million for Everglades restoration every year for the next decade. Very quietly involved in that. We we are apolitical and non-confrontational. That is really our watchword. We're not going to get up there and tell the government that they're bad and they're wrong. We respect the organizations. We feel that's the best way to move, but we try to very quietly come to some consensus about positive progress that can be made. So it's, sometimes you get what you want.
That's right. Thank you very much, Julie.